A voice in the dust. The sky above planet Horus 9 was always gray. Dust clouds moved slowly over the dry land, and nothing grew easily here. But the humans came anyway, hoping to make it a new Earth. Jacob Weller was one of those humans. A farmer, strong and quiet. He had a big scar across his jaw and eyes that had seen too many wars. He came to Horus 9 to forget the past and start again. Every day, Jacob worked the land with his old farming bot, Digsy. The sun here was weak but still hot. The soil was hard, and nothing came easy. Jacob liked it that way. He didn't want things to be easy anymore. One evening, as the light turned orange and long shadows stretched across the dust, Jacob heard something strange. Not the wind, not Digsy. It was a voice. A soft voice. Please. Jacob froze. He slowly turned around and reached for the old blaster at his hip. There, standing in the dust, was a tall alien woman. Her skin was a soft silver blue. Her hair, long and dark like midnight water. Two small children stood beside her, clinging to her legs. They looked thin. Too thin. The woman took a step forward, then dropped to her knees. "I'll work your fields, human," she said. Her voice cracked with dryness. "Just feed my hungry children." Jacob didn't move for a moment. He looked at her trembling hands, at the way the children didn't look up. They were scared, or maybe just tired. He didn't lower his blaster. "You're a Zalari," he said slowly. The woman nodded. "Yes. There's not supposed to be any of your kind left on this continent. You people lost the war." "I didn't fight," she said. "I ran. I hid. I just want my children to live." Jacob looked at the kids again. Their ribs showed through their thin skin. Their eyes were hollow. He finally lowered the blaster, but didn't put it away. "What's your name, Mon?" he asked. "Valari." He pointed toward the field. "You know how to work this land?" "I was born on it." That made Jacob pause. "You're not just any Zalari," he muttered. "You're native to this region." "Yes." He looked down at her for a long time. Then he turned to Digsy and said, "Turn off." The bot beeped and powered down. Jacob sighed. "I don't have much food," he said, "but I won't let your kids starve." Valari bowed her head. "Thank you. But," Jacob added, "if you try anything at all, I won't hesitate." Valari didn't argue. That night, Jacob made soup from the little dried beans he had and shared it with Valari and her children. They didn't speak much. The kids ate fast, like they hadn't eaten in days. Jacob watched them. They were quiet. Almost too quiet for kids. But he didn't ask questions. Not yet. Valari slept near the barn with her children, using some old blankets. She didn't complain. She didn't even ask for more. At midnight, Jacob stepped outside for a breath of air. The stars above Horus 9 were strange and cold, not like Earth. He looked toward the barn and saw something strange. Valari was kneeling in the field, her hands pressed against the soil. She was whispering. Her voice was low, like a song. Jacob stayed hidden behind the shed. He didn't want to startle her, but he watched. The soil around her hands began to shimmer. Just a little, as if the land was listening. Then, slowly, she stood and walked back to the barn, not seeing him. Jacob stayed outside for a while, staring at the ground she touched. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The dry patches where Valari had kneeled were greener. A few small shoots had broken through the surface, young plants, where nothing had grown before. Jacob stood there, for a long time rubbing his chin. "What are you?" he whispered. He looked back toward the barn. Valari was already awake, helping Digsy load soil into the planting trays. She worked fast. Her children watched silently from a corner. Jacob didn't say anything. Not yet. But inside, a storm of questions had begun. And deep down, he knew this woman hadn't come just to work the fields. She had brought something with her, something old, something powerful, and something dangerous. A deal in the dirt morning on planet Horus 9 came with no birds, no breeze, just silence and dust. The only sound was the soft hum of farming bots and the crunch of boots over dry soil. Jacob Weller hadn't slept well. His dreams were full of strange whispers, glowing roots, and Valari's silver hands pressing into the earth like a priestess in a forgotten temple. He tried to tell himself it was just stress, just hunger, just loneliness, but then he walked out into his field and saw the truth. Green. Real. Living green. The kind of green he hadn't seen since he left Earth. 3 small plants had grown overnight, where Valari had touched the ground. Perfect sprouts. No rot. No dust mold. That wasn't normal. And Jacob hated things that weren't normal. He stood there, staring at the plants, when Valari's voice came from behind him. "I told you," she said softly. "I was born on this land." Jacob turned, trying to stay calm. "What did you do to my field?" "I woke it," she said, as if that was a normal thing to say. Jacob stepped closer. "You woke it?" Valari didn't blink. "This soil isn't dead. It's sleeping. The humans who came before you poisoned it with machines, but under the poison, there is memory." Jacob looked down at the soil. "Memory? Are you saying the dirt remembers you?" Valari looked toward her children, who sat near the barn eating. "Dry bread? Yes, this planet remembers everything. Pain, war, blood. But also, kindness." Jacob didn't like how calm she was, how peaceful. He'd seen that look before, on Earth, in the eyes of soldiers who'd seen too much and lost everything. "You said you'd work for food," he said, "not perform, whatever that was." "I am working," Valari said. "You want crops, I can grow them." Jacob hesitated. She wasn't wrong. His last harvest had failed. He was nearly out of rations. "Fine," he said. "You get half a portion per day. That includes your kids. You get sick or try to leave with anything and I turn you in." Valari nodded once. "Deal." She held out her hand. Jacob didn't shake it. Over the next week, things changed. The crops where Valari walked grew faster, stronger. Jacob expanded the plots, giving her more space to wake. She worked from dawn till dusk without complaint. Her children stayed, quiet. Too quiet. They didn't talk, didn't play, didn't even laugh. Just stared at the ground, or followed her like shadows. Digsy, Jacob's bot, began detecting odd heat signatures in the soil. The readings didn't make sense. Roots growing too fast. Soil temperatures slightly rising. No explanation. One night Jacob stayed awake and followed Valari again. This time she was deeper in the fields, far from camp. She knelt down and placed both hands on the ground, her eyes closed. And then, he heard it. A low hum. Not from her lips, but from the earth itself, like a song rising through the soil. The dirt shimmered faintly. Jacob's skin crawled. Then Valari whispered something, a word in a language he didn't know, the same word, again and again. Threlin. Threlin. Jacob stepped back. He didn't want her to hear him, but he slipped, and his boot crunched on a branch. Valari turned her head slightly. "You should not be here, Jacob Weller." Jacob stepped forward. "What does that word mean? What are you saying to my soil?" Valari stood up slowly. "Not your soil. This land was never yours." "Then why help me grow it?" "Because if I don't," she said quietly, "others will come, and they will burn what is left." The next day, trouble arrived. A hover truck landed near Jacob's property. Loud, shiny, and full of arrogant voices. 3 settlers jumped down, wearing corporate badges. A Greasus inspection unit. One of them, tall, with a cybernetic eye, stepped forward. "Weller, we heard your crops are suddenly thriving. You haven't filed new nutrient orders, no tech upgrades. So how?" Jacob kept his face blank. "Got lucky with the soil. Shifted my irrigation pattern," the inspector smirked. "We don't believe in luck, not out here." Then he noticed Valari in the distance, carrying water buckets. Her children peeked from behind a shed. The inspector's eye zoomed in. "You've got a Zalari working your fields?" Jacob crossed his arms. "She offered to work for food. That's not illegal." The inspector leaned closer. "Technically, no. But morally, that's dangerous, Weller. You know what these things did in them." "Va." Jacob didn't answer. The inspector smiled. "We'll be back, with questions." That night, Jacob found Valari sitting with her kids inside the barn. They were whispering, not to each other, to the dirt floor. Jacob stepped in. "What did you mean? Others will burn what is left?" Valari looked up. Her eyes were glowing faintly in the dark. "There is something sleeping beneath this land," she said. "The humans tried to kill it. But you cannot kill what grows in silence." Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. "And these plants?" he asked. "They're not normal, are they?" Valari shook her head. "They are not just food. They are memory. And memory is waking. Secrets in the soil." For the next 3 nights, Jacob Weller didn't sleep. Not because of noise, Horus 9 was always quiet, but because of dreams. Vivid, impossible dreams. In one of them, the fields behind his farm turned red, and something ancient rose from the soil, or not a machine, not an alien, something in between. Its voice had no sound, but he heard it anyway. A word kept echoing in his mind. Threlin. Every morning he woke with dirt under his fingernails, even though he hadn't touched the soil. Day 10, Jacob stood at the edge of his field, where green now spread like wildfire. The crops were growing at a speed that defied every known law of botany and planetary biology. He knelt and touched a leaf. It pulsed, gently, like a heartbeat. Valari watched from a distance. She stood silent, her children crouched beside her, always staring at the earth like it might whisper a secret only they could hear. Jacob stood and walked toward her. "These plants, they're not natural." Valari didn't deny it. "They are not made," she said. "They are remembered." He frowned. "What the hell does that even mean?" Valari looked up at the sky. "This land used to be alive in ways you cannot understand. Before humans came, before machines, it listened, it grew what was needed, it punished when abused." Jacob stared. "Punished?" She nodded slowly. "The soil holds its own justice. You just haven't seen it yet." That evening, Jacob heard voices coming through the radio. Sector 9A. Bioanomaly detected. Possible unauthorized growth. Zone inspection team dispatched. They were coming back. The Agresis Corporation didn't like things it couldn't explain. If they saw this miracle growth, or whatever Valari had awakened, they'd burn it down without hesitation, or worse, they'd try to harvest it. That night, Jacob loaded his blaster and walked into the shed where Valari was preparing a small fire. Her children were asleep beside her, curled up like foxes. He sat down, not speaking for a moment. "Tell me the truth," he said. "What's under this farm?" Valari stared into the fire. "You've seen the roots, haven't you?" she asked. Jacob hesitated. He hadn't told her. But yes. Earlier that day, he dug near one of the fast-growing crops and found black roots, not brown, not green. Black, glossy, almost metallic, and pulsing with a strange glow. When he tried to cut one, it let out a sound. Not a scream, exactly. More like a memory. "Yes," he said. "I saw them." Valari nodded. "You've woken the threshold. Beneath this soil lies the memory of a species older than yours or mine. The Zalari called it the deep root." Jacob's jaw clenched. "I've read about the deep root. Military reports say it was a myth, a defense system." Valari smiled. Not kindly, not defense. Balance. It kept the planet alive. But when your people came, they tried to kill it. Cut it out. Build over it. Jacob's voice dropped. "What happens if it fully wakes up?" Valari looked into his eyes. "Then it will decide who belongs here." Later that night, Jacob couldn't sleep again, so he wandered into the far field. The stars were dim above, but the plants glowed faintly now, like the moonlight had fallen into them and stayed. He knelt, digging carefully near one of the new plants, and there it was again, a black root. But this time, it moved. It shifted gently, like it knew he was there. Suddenly something flashed in his mind. Not a memory, but a vision. A burning sky. A war. Solari warriors screaming as giant metal machines tore through forests. And beneath it all, a giant network of roots alive, weeping green light. He gasped and fell back. Behind him, Valari was watching, quiet as ever. "You saw," she said. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, breathing hard. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward and knelt beside the root. "You are connected now," she said. "It knows you. You touched it. It will remember your choice." The warning the next morning, Agresis returned. But not just inspectors this time. Armed drones, 2 hovercrafts, a containment team. They didn't knock. The man with the cybernetic eye stepped out again, scanning the field with a smirk. Well, he said. "We've got ourselves a miracle grower." Jacob stepped in front of them. "You're trespassing." The inspector ignored him. "Samples. I want them. All of them." 2 soldiers stepped toward the crops, and that's when it happened. The ground pulsed, just once, but it was enough. The plants nearest the soldiers suddenly lashed upward, vines whipping like snakes. The men screamed, backing away as roots slithered from the soil like tentacles. The lead inspector turned pale. "What the—" Jacob didn't blink. He stood tall and calm. "You're not welcome here." The inspector looked at Valari, who stood silently at the edge of the field, her children behind her. "You're hiding something," he growled. Jacob's voice was cold. "We're growing something. You're the ones destroying it." The end of part 3. A whisper. Beneath. That night, Jacob stood at the edge of the glowing field. Valari came and stood beside him. "They'll be back," he said. "They always come back," she replied. "But next time," he said, "we'll be ready." Valari looked down at her children, who were now smiling for the first time in days. "The deep root remembers you," she said, "and it does not forget kindness." Jacob nodded, gripping his blaster. "Then maybe it's time to remind Agresis what happens when you mess with memory." The harvest war, when others came. The crops didn't just grow. They watched. By now, the entire south field shimmered under the strange green glow of alien plants, their roots pulsing with quiet energy like veins beneath skin. Some of the stalks had started curving toward the sun even when there wasn't any. A few even twitched when disturbed, not in fear, but like they were irritated. Jacob Weller stared at them from his porch, sipping what passed for coffee on. Horus 9 Valari's children were playing in the field, but not like normal children. They weren't kicking a ball or chasing each other. They were whispering to the crops, and the crops seemed to whisper back. Jacob turned to Valari, who was repairing a solar panel nearby. "They're not just plants," he said flatly. Valari didn't look up. "No, they're ancestors." Jacob choked slightly. "Ancestors?" Valari stood and brushed dirt off her hands. The deep root wasn't just a network, it was family. The old Zalari planted their memories into the roots before death. They believed the soil would carry their wisdom. Jacob squinted at the glowing rows. "So I'm feeding crops that are haunted?" Valari finally smiled. "Haunted? No, just awake." The others came 2 days later. It started, not with guns, with fire. The first attack came at night. A firebomb dropped from a stealth drone, silent, fast, cruel. It hit the edge of the western crop zone, setting a third of the field ablaze in seconds. Jacob and Valari rushed outside, coughing through smoke. The kids were already digging tunnels, leading smaller root bundles away from the flames, like guiding animals to safety. The crops didn't scream, but the sound of burning roots was worse. It was like 1,000 whispers turning into one. Long breath, and then silence. Jacob looked up. Through the smoke, he saw a glowing red mark in the sky. Agresis war mark. The corporation wasn't playing nice anymore. The stand. The next morning, Jacob sent a signal, not to the government, not to any military base, to a few old war friends, men and women who owed him favors from Earth. Soldiers, hackers, a mechanic named Reggie who once patched up a tank with duct tape and chewing gum. They arrived 3 days later, 6 rough-looking ex-soldiers in mismatched armor, all carrying old but reliable weapons. They stared at the glowing crops, then at Valari. "Weller," Reggie muttered, "you always find the weirdest places to retire." Jacob smirked. "This one grows its own security system." Reggie pointed at the field. "These things friendly?" Mostly. They only eat idiots." The plan. Valari drew a map in the dirt using her finger. She showed Jacob and the others the underground network of root tunnels. They reached far beyond the surface crops. "We can use the tunnels to move supplies, and to escape if needed." Reggie nodded. "Or to flank anyone who comes in shooting." Jacob grinned. "Exactly." But Valari wasn't smiling. "They'll come in force next time," she said. "Not just to burn, to take." Jacob's face darkened. "Then we show them what happens when you try to harvest what doesn't belong to you." The harvest war begins. The next attack was larger. 3 hovercraft, at least 20 armed men, heavy drones, scanners, diggers, and a flamethrower unit. Jacob and his team were ready. The crops were more than ready. As the first boots touched, down on the glowing soil the plants moved. Vines shot upward, grabbing weapons and yanking them into the ground. Roots burst from the earth and pulled machines apart like toy blocks. One soldier screamed as his drone was crushed midair by 2 massive stalks that grew in seconds, wrapping around the metal like living cables. Jacob fired from the rooftop, Reggie flanking from the side barn. Valari? She walked into the center of the field, lifted her hands and spoke one word. Thorellin. The ground answered. An enormous root structure erupted upward, like a serpent made of bark and light. It didn't attack. It stood, blocking the heart of the farm like a guardian. The soldiers hesitated. That's when the whisper began again. Not from Valari. Not from the crops. From beneath. Words in no known human language. Every soldier froze. Some dropped their weapons. Others fired in panic and were swallowed by the earth itself. Jacob turned to Valari, wide-eyed. "What did you wake?" She looked at him. Her eyes weren't glowing anymore. They were crying. "Not me," she said. "You did." Aftermath only. 5 Agrisis troops made it back to their ship, but they didn't speak. Whatever they saw, whatever they felt, it broke something inside. The ship lifted off silently. The fields were smoking again, but not from fire, from change. The soil was darker now, thicker, more alive. Reggie stood beside Jacob and watched a new plant sprout beside his boot. "Okay," he muttered. "I officially retire again. From farming." Final scene of part 4. Later that night, Jacob stood alone in the center of the glowing field. The plants didn't fear him. They bent slightly as he walked, almost like bowing. Valari appeared beside him. "It chose you," she said. Jacob didn't look at her. "I didn't ask to be chosen," she nodded. "That's why it chose you." He looked at the stars. "They'll come back, with more fire. Bigger guns." Valari placed a seed in his palm. "Then we grow bigger answers." And beneath their feet the earth pulsed once more, and as if agreeing. Hunger returns. Beneath the fields, there was a sound under the soil now. Not thunder, not wind, a heartbeat. Steady, slow, alive. Jacob heard it at night, through his boots, in his bones. The crops pulsed with it. The air carried it like distant drums from beneath the earth. The deep root was no longer sleeping. It was hungry. The children change. Valari's children had always been quiet, shy, always whispering to the crops, always avoiding eye contact. But now, They were changing. Jacob noticed first when the older one, Mira, touched a vine and it bloomed instantly, not with flowers, but with symbols. Glowing marks ran up the plant like ancient writing, pulsing softly in rhythm with her breath. He watched from a distance, jaw tight. He didn't interrupt. The younger one, Kale, had begun drawing spirals in the dirt, perfect circles, impossible geometry. He didn't speak. He hummed. The soil responded. Small stalks would rise where he touched. Are they doing it on purpose? Jacob asked Valari. Valari didn't answer immediately. They're not fully Zalari, she finally said. Jacob blinked. Come again? Valari looked toward her children, sadness in her voice. They were born during the fall of our last city. Their father was one of yours. Jacob stiffened. A human? A soldier, she said. He saved me. He died for me. For them. Jacob looked at the children again, this time differently. You mean to tell me your kids are… Yes, she said. Half human, half Solari. But now, they are something else. The deep root is speaking to them, and they're listening. The cracks appear that night. Something deep in the field split open. A sinkhole, sudden and perfect, like a mouth yawning. Digsy, Jacob's old farming bot, scanned it and reported subterranean motion, root density abnormal, energy readings, unclassifiable. Jacob, Valari, and the children stood at the edge, staring down. It wasn't just a hole. It was a tunnel. No, a vein, glowing slightly, lined with living root walls that pulsed in time with that underground heartbeat. I'm going in, Jacob said, already grabbing gear. You shouldn't, Valari said softly. The memory down there is not meant for your kind. Jacob looked her in the eyes. Then it's a good thing I'm already broken. Beneath the fields, the tunnel was warmer than expected. Alive. Breathing. Like stepping into the body of something sleeping, dreaming. Jacob walked slowly, rifle in hand, light on. Valari followed. So did Mira and Kale, without being told. As if guided by instinct. As they moved deeper, the walls began to shift. Strange symbols grew along the root structures, glowing glyphs like echoes of thoughts. The further they went, the clearer the symbols became. Jacob stopped at one. It showed a human, not drawn, remembered. A soldier standing with a Zalari woman. Behind them, fire, war, death. It was Valari and himself. He turned to Valari. How is this possible? This place doesn't record what happened, she whispered. It records what is felt. The heart, they reached a massive chamber, at the center a core root structure pulsing with light. Dozens of smaller tendrils connected to it, like veins to a heart. Around it ancient bones, human and Zalari, tangled in roots peacefully held, not devoured. Kyle walked to the root, laid his small hand on it. Suddenly the whole chamber flashed, memories poured in. Not words, emotions, images. Zalari children, running through glowing forests, a giant machine tearing through their land, humans starving, reaching for help. A truce. Broken. And then, nothing. Silence. Burial. Jacob dropped to one knee, overwhelmed. Valari looked at him. It wasn't war that killed this planet. It was hunger. He looked up. Ours, yours, everyone's. The hunger returns. The deep root had sustained life on Horus 9 for millennia. It had kept balance, grown food that healed, trees that sang. But when war came, both sides tried to control it. So it withdrew, hid, slept, until now. Now it was awake. And it remembered the pain of being used. Jacob looked around, heart pounding. So it's angry? Valari shook her head. No. Worse. It's deciding. Above ground, trouble returns. While they were underground, Agrisis arrived again. But this time, they brought harvest ships, giant industrial rigs that could rip square kilometers of land in minutes. It wasn't about burning anymore. It was extraction. They'd detected the bioenergy. They didn't want to destroy the deep root. They wanted to own it. End scene. A warning from below as Jacob emerged from the tunnel. The entire field was glowing, brighter than ever. Valari turned her face to the wind. "It's not just you they remember now," she whispered. Jacob looked out across the horizon. Agrisis harvesters were on their way. The crops began to bend, not in fear, but in formation. Waiting, preparing. Jacob clenched his fists. "Let them come." Valari turned to him. "This time," she said, "we don't fight for the land." He nodded. "We fight with it." Roots of rebellion. The field no longer whispered. It roared. A low, steady hum echoed across Jacob Weller's land. Not from machines, but from the ground itself. The deep root was awake now, not just below the surface, but everywhere, and it was angry. The arrival of the reapers. The horizon shimmered. 3 massive Agrisis harvest-class dread rigs rolled over the soil like titans made of steel and greed. Each one the size of a small town. Spiked harvest wheels spun like slow guillotines, tearing through anything in their path. Above them, drone swarms buzzed like mechanical hornets. Behind them, 100 soldiers in exosuits armed with pulse, rifles and nerve gas. The message was clear: stand down, or be removed. Jacob stood at the center of his field, calm as the storm approached. Valari beside him, Mira and Kale flanking them. Reggie and the rest of the ex-soldier crew locking in defensive positions. But Jacob didn't raise his weapon. He simply stepped aside, and the soil beneath him shifted. The rise of the roots, with a sound like 1,000 tree trunks cracking open. The crops moved, not swaying, not shaking. Standing. The tall stalks straightened into towering spears of green, their vines wrapping around each other like armor. Some formed walls, others limbs. One giant stalk burst open to reveal an enormous core root guardian, shaped like a humanoid figure. Half tree, half memory. Valari stepped forward and whispered a word. Thorellin. The guardian responded with a deep guttural echo, not sound but a feeling. Every human on the field felt it: regret, grief, and warning. Inside the Reapers, Agrisis commander Torrance Vale watched from the lead dread rig, eyes narrowed. His face was metal, his voice was pure venom. "What in hell's name is that?" his science officer stammered. "Biodefensive anomaly, reactive Terra entity. It's not in any archive." "Sir, I think it's alive." "Burn it anyway." The order was given. The harvesters powered up. The battle begins. The dread rigs rolled forward. The field responded. Roots burst up beneath the wheels, wrapping around axles, yanking steel beasts into the ground like they were made of paper. One rig, tilted sideways, a massive vine crushing its stabilizers. Drones dove in, but were met mid-air by seed spores launched from the plants like missiles. The spores exploded into clouds of electric dust, short-circuiting the drones mid-flight. Agrisis. Soldiers opened fire. Bullets tore through vines, but the vines grew back, faster, smarter. And then they fought back. The children. Lead Mira and Kyle stepped into the center of the battlefield. Their eyes glowed now. Not blue, not green. Deep root. White. Kale raised his hand. The earth beneath a platoon of soldiers buckled, swallowing them whole, then resealed like water closing around a stone. Mira sang, softly. The melody was old, ancient, sung once by the Zalari before the wars. The crops around her began to shift, pulling into a single massive root beast, a creature of pure, planetary memory. It moved like liquid wood, swatting tanks with limbs that crackled like thunder. Reggie muttered into his helmet mic. "So, when exactly did the plants get their own army?" Jacob responded, grim but impressed. When they got sick of being food, inside the mind of the deep root. Meanwhile, Jacob collapsed. Not from wounds, not from fear, from connection. He saw it, the heart of the deep root, not in roots but in memory. 1,000 years of growth, hundreds of species nourished. Then, flame, steel, war, the betrayal. It had not wanted to fight. It had waited for a voice that didn't shout, a touch that didn't take. It had chosen him. The turning point Torrance Vale ordered airstrikes, but just as the ships approached, the sky changed color. Thick green clouds formed overhead, lightning cracking sideways through a curtain of spores and pollen. The ships lost visual. They didn't make it back. One exploded mid-air, taken by the wind. The other was gently wrapped in vines before being set down like a toy. The deep root didn't want war, but it wasn't afraid of it either. The final confrontation Vale himself exited the final rig, pulse cannon in hand, face twisted with fury. You think this ends with vines and fairy tales? He shouted. Jacob stepped forward. It ends when you stop treating life like property. Vale raised his weapon. Too slow. The core root guardian moved faster than any machine. One massive hand swatted Vale like a fly, not killing him, but knocking the memory of violence out of his system. He landed hard, groaning, vines already growing over his suit, holding, not crushing. The silence. After. The battlefield grew quiet. No flames, no screams. Just roots, gently returning to the soil. The deep root retreated, not in fear, but in peace. The field began to grow again, better, stronger, wiser. Valari sat with her children under the shade of a stalk that now grew fruit that healed. Jacob looked over the land, hands muddy, heart full. Reggie walked over, helmet off. So, how do we explain this to the galaxy? Jacob shrugged. We don't. He looked at Mira and Kale, who were teaching birds, real ones now, to perch on growing vines. We just protect it. Valari turned to him. The planet has chosen. He smiled. Then let's not disappoint it. The price of mercy, a new seed. The land sleeps again. But not all is silent. The battlefield was gone. In its place stood a living monument, a sprawling jungle of silver-green vines, glowing stalks, and fruit-laden trees that shouldn't exist on any scientific record. Where tanks once roared, flowers now bloomed. Where soldiers fell, roots now pulsed with silent light, the memories of both sides woven into the soil like threads in a forgotten tapestry. The war was over. But Jacob Weller didn't feel peace. Not yet. He stood at the edge of the field, watching Valari. Silent, unmoving, kneeling in the center of the deep-root grove. She hadn't spoken in hours. And the deep-root? It waited too. The deep-root's decision. That night, Jacob sat with Mira and Kale beneath the enormous spiral fruit tree, one of the new crops, rich with bioenergy and healing properties. The children were quiet. Why isn't your mother talking? Jacob asked softly. Kale looked up, his voice just above a whisper. Because she's listening. To who? Mira turned to him. To the deep root. It's deciding. Jacob stiffened. Deciding what? Kale met his eyes, serious beyond his years. Whether it can forgive your kind. Jacob felt a chill crawl down his spine. I thought it already had. Mira shook her head. No. It just gave you time. Valari's choice. The next morning, Valari stood. She turned to Jacob, her face calm, too calm. I spoke to it, she said. It wants something. Jacob narrowed his eyes. What? She held out her hand. In her palm was a seed, small, glowing, and alive in a way no earth-born thing could be. This is the last root core, the heart of the deep root. the last of its pure memory. It must leave this planet. Jacob stepped back. Leave? Why? Villari's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. Because if it stays, others will come again. The greedy, the cruel, they always do. Jacob shook his head. So what, we just run? No, she said. We plant it elsewhere. A new beginning. A seed of memory on another world. Jacob stared at the tiny, glowing object. And who takes it? Villari looked. At her children, then at him, I do. The price of mercy, Villari explained the truth. The deep root would not allow itself to be split again. This seed contained the entire ancestral essence of Horus 9, its wisdom, its pain, its love for balance. But it needed a carrier, one who had both blood and memory tied to the land, and carrying it would cost her everything. Her body would not survive the transfer. She would become the seed, not metaphorically, literally, a vessel of growth. A sacrifice of soul. Jacob's voice broke. There must be another way. Villari shook her head. Mercy always has a price. The final farewell, as dawn approached, Villari held her children close. Mira wept. Kyle buried his face in her robes. Jacob stood back, fists clenched. I never said thank you, he muttered. Villari turned to him, smiling gently. You gave me a place to work, and children a place to live. That was enough. She placed the seed into her chest. It sank gently, like a raindrop into calm water. Her body began to glow. Roots emerged from her feet, anchoring her to the soil. She turned one last time. Remember, this, Jacob Weller. The land does not need to belong to anyone. But if someone belongs to the land, it will protect them. Then, like mist in morning light, she was gone. The new seed where Villari had stood, a new tree grew, not quickly, not violently, just naturally. It twisted upward in spirals, its bark shimmering with soft gold veins. From it, soft petals rained down, not like leaves, but like memories gently falling. The deep root had been reborn, not hidden, not angry, just beginning again. Epilogue. A message for the stars weeks past. Jacob helped build a new community. A place not of conquest, but of cultivation. Scientists, refugees, ex-soldiers, even some of Agris's former workers who chose redemption over wealth. They came, not to own the land, to learn from it. Mira and Kale took the role of guardians. They didn't grow up. They grew outward, minds linked with the new deep root, caretakers of planetary balance. And Jacob, he finally rested. He still farmed, still tilled the soil. But now, the soil remembered him too. In the distance, a starship lifted quietly. Inside, a small seed pod glowing. Its destination, unknown. Its mission, to plant memory before the next war, before the next hunger, before another planet is forced to scream. And as it disappeared into the sky, one whisper echoed across the trees, of Horus 9, mercy is not weakness, it is the seed of strength.